Hi, I'm Jeff Kleinman with drinkspirits.com, and we're doing a virtual tasting today of Mortlach from Diageo, and we're joined by Georgie Bell, who's talking to us today out of Scotland. Are you in Edinburgh?
I am in Edinburgh, yes.
Great, great. Well, thanks for making time to talk about Mortlach. Interesting thing about Mortlach is, you say Mortlach to some, and hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, and there's a lot of recognition and light bulbs go off and excitement, and you say Mortlach to some other people, and they go, "What is that? Is that some sort of mythical Scottish beast?"
So Mortlach has, for decades, been this secret amongst whiskey connoisseurs and with whiskey blenders as well. With my past working with the society, our members knew Mortlach, and they knew that whenever we had it in to buy it straight away, because it's always been this little gem. That's why this upcoming launch is so exciting, because we're actually finally letting this secret out, which is fantastic.
Now, people probably have consumed Mortlach before without recognizing it, because this is, although we're seeing this here as a single malt, it's been producing malt for blends for quite some time.
Yeah, so Mortlach's actually been it's been running since 1823 when it was launched. When it was founded, but it was bought by John Walker and Sons in 1923. So ever since then, and that's testimony to the fact that they invested in it. So they realized the power of it in blends. And so ever since then, it has been going into the world's finest blends. I was actually with our blending team yesterday, the day before yesterday, and they were saying how it is an absolute blender's dream. It can make light whiskies lighter, it can make rich whiskies even richer and more muscular, it can make smoky whiskies a little bit zestier and fresher. So it's kind of multi-based, it's got many different characteristics.
And so, because it's such a core ingredient of certain blends and a kind of a magical tool, how did it go from being sort of the blender secret to, the products that we're about to see and taste in front of us?
Well, it all sort of started in June of 2012, because Diageo, we announced that we were going to be investing £1 billion into the future of Scotch whisky. And then in December of last year, we announced that out of that, we were going to be investing £18 million into the expansion of the distillery, raising it from 3.7 to 7.4 million litres of pure alcohol a year. And I think, we're finally doing something with it. I think we finally realized that we're like, wow, we could launch this as a single malt. Personally, when I heard about us launching it, my instant reaction was, thank God we're finally doing something with it. So I think people sort of realized that, and they were like, no, this has the potential, we can do this.
Now, I know that there are bottles of Mortlach kind of floating around both historically and by specialty bottling companies. How much are those representative, or the historic Mortlach, to what we're about to taste?
So different, seriously. So the most sort of known Mortlach bottling in the past was the Flora and Fauna 16-year, which has now been discontinued. The reason being that the Flora and Fauna series was brought out for those distilleries within Diageo that didn't have their own range of expressions. So when we announced that we were giving Mortlach the limelight that it deserves, we discontinued the 16-year-old. And have you tried Mortlach Flora and Fauna 16?
No, actually, I haven't. It's and I haven't dug into our samples yet. I wanted to have my first tasting be, our first tasting together here.
Yeah.
No, I've heard tales of Mortlach, but never had the opportunity to try it.
So Mortlach Flora and Fauna 16-year is stunning, but it's quite a big sherry beast of a dram. It's rich, it's voluptuous, but it is. It's got quite a lot of European oak dominance, whereas with the new expressions, we wanted the distillery characteristic to come through. We've got a very unique 2.81 distillation process, which I'm sure we'll go into in a couple of minutes. And we wanted every single one of them to be identifiably Mortlach. We didn't want it to be clouded by oak. We wanted the oak and the wood that it was matured in to sort of reflect the distillery and reflect that robust, rich, thick, muscular characteristic that comes from the production process.
I'll actually direct you to that 2.81, which I kind of sometimes feels like the whiskey pie of mathematics for distilling. I've had it explained to me before, but it's one of those things where it's like, how is something distilled 2.81 times?
How? Okay, so are you ready for this?
Yeah. Let's okay. Well, this is again probably the most complicated, I think, style of distillation that I've seen in Scotland. So why don't you go ahead?
And it is quite complicated. So I spent time up at the distillery with the boys up there, and I did full shifts with them. And I'd be in the control room, and I'd be like, right, so that goes to there, and then it goes around there, and then it goes around another time, and they'd be like, you almost had it, and then you completely lost it at the end. Basically, within the Mortlach still house, we've got 6 stills. Now, me saying 6 stills is really key there because I haven't said 3 sets of stills. So we have 3 wash stills and 3 spirit stills, all completely different shapes and sizes. And Dr. Jim Beveridge has actually gone on to describe the Mortlach still house like having 3 separate distilleries in one still house. And essentially what we do is we create 3 separate spirit streams. So to sort of break it down, wash still number 3 is paired directly into spirit still number 3. So pretty standard distillation process there. Creates a sort of a moderate malty distillate. Then wash stills 1 and 2 work as a pair. They could be one large still, but they're not. They're 2 small stills, but they run at the same time, creating the low wines at about 24% ABV. The first half of that low wines, so the lighter half, then goes through spirit still number 2. So essentially creating sort of a light, floral, fruity distillate. We then take the heavier side, so the second half of those low wines from wash stills 1 and 2, and we put it through spirit still number 1, which is affectionately known as Wee Witchy Once. We then put it through a second time, but with another load of the heavier part of the low wines, because wash still 1 and 2 had also been running at that same time. So we're putting it through a second time. We then take the second half, so the richer half of the second run, so the richest part of the richest part of the richest part, and we put that through a third time, and we take spirit from that. So we draw off spirit from spirit still number 1 on every third run. So in essence, what we're doing is we're concentrating and richening and thickening that up to create this really robust, muscular stream. And it's through the combination of those 3 distillate streams that we get Mortlach New Make, and that's where the 2.81 distillation process and the number comes from.
In a lot of ways, this is like one of those, like when somebody explains a very complicated board game, you see all the pictures in front of you, and you're like, okay, let's just play, and I'm sure I'll understand it.
It is very bad. I mean, the important thing to sort of take away from it is that essentially, as I said before, it is like 3 distilleries in one still house, and you've got your multi-moderate stream, your really like fresh, zesty floral stream, and then this rich, thick stream that's been sort of, imagine if you've got like a pan of something on the stove and you're boiling it down and condensing, that's essentially what we do. And it's funny how every part of the production process sort of fits together to create this rich, robust, muscular spirit. So we also use, we have traditional worm tub condensers. So again, we're reducing the copper contact to be able to create sort of a rich distillate.
Wow. So is this very distinct to Mortlach, or is this kind of multi-still Rubik's Cube of distilling kind of done at other distilleries?
So I believe there are a few other distilleries in Scotland that have something like that's different from the usual double distillation system, but we're the only ones that actually have like this as weird and as unique and as precise as that. I know that I believe it's Ben Rinnes that also has a similar, or they have a bit of a silly, crazy distillation pattern, but that was put in place in, I think it was 1971. Whereas with ours, it was actually put in by one of our greatest owners, Dr. Alexander Cowie. So he put this in 1896. And we honoured it when the distillery was expanded in 1962. And we're honouring it. So we're completely replicating it with the new Stillhouse expansion that's going on at the moment.
And that new Stillhouse expansion is non-trivial. It's millions and millions of pounds.
18 million to be exact. So we're completely doubling expansion.
So although, I mean, obviously we're going to be tasting up to a 25-year, this is really the coming out or re-coming out of a brand that we'll be seeing a lot of spirit from.
Well, I hope so. But the thing is that, I mean, you know this with distillation is, yeah, we're building a new Stillhouse, which is super exciting. But it's not going to be open until next year. And then you've got to make the whiskey. And then whiskey, you know, we can't just click our fingers and it will be there. You know, it takes time to mature and to age. So, you know, us investing the money to increase the Stillhouse capacity is us investing in the future of Mortlach and us sort of opening up our eyes and realizing that actually the world deserves this. So.
Cool. Well, I mean, we're doing here a virtual tasting, so let's get to the tasting part. Let's see. The first one I have here is saying rare old. So talk to me about what exactly is rare old while I season my glass and get the taste ready.
Okay. So Mortlach Rare Olds is it's got an engineered complexity that comes from 4 different cask types. So the way it was created, it's got 4 different cask types at a variety of different ages. So it's got multi-dimensional levels of flavor in there. Completely flavor driven, which I'm a huge fan of because, you know, older whiskies bring sort of maturity and depth, and then younger whiskies bring in sort of a lightness to touch. And so by putting them and combining them together, you really do get a multi-dimensional whiskey at the end of the day. So if I talk you through the different cask types as you nose it, I often find whiskies not quite concentrated, but it's easier to translate when I'm talking through the wood types. So the first type of cask that you've got in here is your first fill bourbon barrels. So you can get that lovely sort of that vanilla, sort of a nice sort of typical oak lactone note coming through. So coconut, toffee. And then we've got first fill sherry butts. So that really complements the distillation process and that richness. We've used them in a moderate amount because we didn't really want the whiskey to be too overly sherried. So you've got the beautiful sort of rich fruitcake notes coming through, dark stone fruits, the heaviness about it. Then we've used refill casks. And the beauty of these is they allow that distillery expression to shine through and that distillery characteristic. They allow for subtle aging, and you get a little bit of like a sweet, fruity, sort of floral. I almost get like a peachy white jasmine note that comes off of that. And then finally, we've used rejuvenated casks. So casks that have been previously used in the whiskey industry. Then we've shaven out the char and recharred them, so giving them a new lease of life. And the beauty of rejuvenated casks is that you're uncovering this fresh layer of new wood. So you get this beautiful spice that comes through and also that beautiful tropical fruit notes. And also the char acts as a layer to allow for interaction between the spirit. It acts as a catalyst. So you get all of these fruity flavors that don't actually come from the wood, that come from the whiskey itself. So that fitted together like a jigsaw creates Mortlach Rare Olds.
So obviously we don't have an age statement on this. We're dealing obviously with a blend of spirits from multiple casks, probably obviously multiple years. Can you give us a tasting age of where you feel this sort of lies in the age space?
I don't think it needs an age space, because why put a number on it? You know, just enjoy the liquid for how it is. As I said, I'm a huge fan of flavor-driven whiskies. And you know, I did a presentation about it in Singapore recently for World Class, and you stick a number on a bottle, it doesn't really tell you much. You know, it's great, but I'm a huge fan of these flavor-driven whiskies because it's almost like that deceptive. You don't really need to identify it with an age. You just enjoy it for that rich note coming through from the more aged stock that's in there. And then that zestier, lighter note from the younger whiskey that's in there to sort of just lift it up.
Cool. So what proof or ABV are we dealing with this release?
So this is sitting at 43.4% ABV.
And is that consistent throughout the line?
Yep. So each of the new expressions is sitting at 43.4%, apart from Mortlach Special Strength, which is a global travel exclusive, and that's sitting at 49%. And you might be thinking, why 43.4? Why not 43? Why not 44? Why not 40? Why have they stuck a decimal point in the spirit strength? Well, Mortlach, as I said before, has always been highly prized sort of amongst blenders, and it's always been the secret amongst the whiskey community and whiskey connoisseurs. And we've actually, this is quite cool, we've actually found letters between John Walker and Sons and Macy's in New York from both pre and post-Prohibition and during Prohibition, saying that we would be stocking Mortlach in Macy's, which is huge. So we know that Mortlach as a single malt was sold in the US in the 1930s. And at the time when it was being shipped over there, it was being shipped over at 86.8 proof, which, if you translate it down, is 43.4%. So we took that strength to the lab and we said, does this work? And they said, yeah, that's absolutely perfect. So the new Mortlachs are there to honor a lot of things. They're there to honor, you know, the past and this sort of this fantastic network that we had in the early sort of 20th century. It's there to honor sort of the Cowie heritage, so our greatest owners. So also, and the distillation process with the wood makeup.
Great, cool. Well, I'm definitely getting off the nose. I'm getting a lot of fruit. I'm getting, you know, that apricot and peach.
Yeah.
Pretty distinctly, and you know, quite a rich nose. Do you wanna go ahead and dive in with a taste?
Yeah, of course. Cheers.
Cheers.
And what do you think?
I like it. There's a lot of again, you know, Mortlach often is called meaty, but the integration between wood and fruit is, I guess, the best way. You know, when we start talking about umami or something that's savory, for me, you do get that chocolate. You get some of that dark wood char. You've got some of the lush fruits from the sherry, and some of those more kind of stone fruits coming together really nice and well, and fairly soft is the wrong word, but fairly easily. I mean, you've got a lot of bold flavor here, but it's you know, we haven't touched it with water, and it is quite easy on the palate.
The thing I was struck with when I first tried it was the thickness, so that mouthfeel, which you'll sort of experience as we go through the three. And that for me really is that richness coming from Spirit Still Number One coming through. And then you touched on the meatiness. So for me, for this one, it's almost like it's got this sort of like venison note, so a gamey note on the finish, which I quite like. And that for me is the meatiness coming through. But as I said, when you sort of talk about the 4 different cask types that have gone in there and then you taste it, you can really sort of break it all down into its certain elements. So for me, I get that spiciness coming through, almost like a spicy nut note, like a walnut or something. And then you've got a little bit of dark chocolate, not too bitter, coming through. Then you've got that meatiness, and then you've got those fresh fruit notes with a little hint of a floral note coming through on the top, just to sort of pick it up slightly.
Yeah, and then I mean, now I'm sitting with my second sip here. Clearly, the younger malt in the blends there on the finish. Which, you know, is drier, I think, probably within line with a lot of the whiskeys that are very popular right now in the American market. That sort of lightly woody, dry finish seems to be something that people are gravitating to, and oddly enough, this finish has a little bit of Johnny Walker-ness to it. Is the best way to say it.
The other thing about this is it's got great mixability. So we're trying it neat right now. It's absolutely fantastic neat. Goes well with just a little splash of water. I mean, it's all personal preference at the end of the day. Big cube of ice, so looking at slow dilution, but just slightly chilling it also accentuates the thickness and the more voluptuousness of body and mouthfeel. And then with my past, I'm a huge fan of cocktails, and I think this would go really well in a cocktail too. It would stand up very well in one.
What are we looking at for 750 milliliters for the rare old?
In terms of price?
Yeah.
That one's sitting at $129.99. So
maybe a little pricey for a cocktail, but seems to me, my first sort of reaction is I meet a lot of people who Johnny Walker drinkers, Johnny Walker Black drinkers, who kind of look at blue as sort of a jumping point, and I often talk about some of the single malts to jump to. This easily seems like a stepstone for a blended whiskey drinker in the Johnny Walker family to be exploring the single malt.
I mean, that or any sort of malt drinker, any sort of dark spirit drinker, the beauty of the rare old is that it's not challenging. It's delicious. I know that sounds really silly, but often you do get a few sort of challenging whiskies that you have to grow to get to. I don't think you have to grow to get this. You can just get it straight away.
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, you sort of created Mortlach in a lot of ways seems like it's a blended whiskey company within a distillery. I mean, you've got 2.81 distillation, you've got different spirit stills and wash stills doing different combinations, and then you've got 4 different kinds of woods that are all kind of coming together into a final product that has that sort of baked in affability, drinkability, complexity, and similar kind of finish without grain, which I'm, as a single malt lover, to me, I'd rather get a dry finish off a younger malt than a dry, kind of harsher finish off an older grain. And that's just kind of my bias.
We're all fans of sweet things. I'm a huge fan of grain whiskey personally, but no, all personal preference. So, but I'm glad you like it.
Absolutely. So let's jump now to the 18 year.
Yeah, which is bottle here.
And kind of a tasting note, one of the things that I'm doing here that I like to do is I tend to like to season, we have a ridiculous washing routine here at Drink Spirits to try to make sure that there's nothing in the glass other than the glass. I tend to kind of coat the edges of the glass with the spirit, dump it out before I even taste it, and even with how much are we starting to get into with the 18?
How much? $299.99.
So yeah, I mean, even at this price, I still recommend those of you who are tasting out there, spill a drop in your glass to rinse it out, dump it out. I mean, it may be hard to do, especially as you get up the line, but it really ensures the vessel that you're going to be using is, alcohol is a solvent. Why not clean your glass with the thing that you're about to drink? It really, I've had glasses with just a little residue and a nice whiskey, and what a way to run a dram. So I'll go ahead and, without further ado, I'll pour that 18-year-old here.
Okay.
And talk to me how now. We are obviously in an age statement. What are we doing in terms of the wood that the 18 is drawing from?
18. We're now drawing from 2 different types of oak casks. The first one being moderate first fill sherry butts. And I use the word moderate there, and I use it strongly because we didn't want it, again, to be too overpowering. The beauty of and the finesse that comes through with all of these 3 new expressions is that they are identifiably Mortlach. and we didn't want to hide them in wood at all. We wanted that distillery blush to really shine through. So first fill moderate sherry casks, and from that you're getting, well, on the nose, it brings the richness. This is incredible. It's quite a step up from the rare old in terms of sort of thickness. You can even smell the voluptuousness on your nose. You kind of know what's going to come on the inside of your cheeks. And then the second type of cask that we've got is refill casks. So again, that allows that distillery expression to shine through, and you get sort of a little bit of a vanilla note coming through, some sort of creme brulee, or like, you know, the toasted top of a creme brulee when it's still slightly a little bit hot and then you crack through. It's kind of like that.
Now, we're not dealing with any peat and malt here, are we?
Nope, none at all.
Although you get, it's, yeah, like you're saying, there's that kind of heathery, kind of vegetal hay, kind of, you know, a little bit funk, I would call it, in a good way, in the nose here.
Always in a good way.
Well, no, well, in this glass, it's a good way. Funk is, you know, I've tasted some peated malts that are, you know, when we start talking barnyard funk, sometimes barnyard funk can be a good thing. Sometimes it's just animal crap. So, you know, it's in this case, you know, we do have some really nice sort of those kind of the hay, but richer and a little more depth in there, which, you know, clearly we're getting off the malt.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's that richness and the muscular note coming through, and I think that really is accentuated through the use of sherry casks in this one. So for me, you know, with the rare old, I get more of a venison style note coming through in terms of that meaty characteristic. And for me, for this 18-year-old, it's more of a meaty, like proper meaty note. Someone once went on to describe the 18-year-old as like the perfect Manhattan. So it's got that richness that comes through from the vermouth. So you've got your lovely sort of sherry cask note there. Then with the bourbon that you'd be using in your Manhattan, that's the refill casks shining through. So that lovely sort of soft vanilla, a little bit of that creme brulee, creme caramel note, a little bit of a sort of a spiced nut note again, and then you get a lovely bitterness, and you'll experience this hopefully on the palate, like a few drops of bitters, and that obviously comes from the tannins that come from the European oak casks. And then it's almost like you've taken an orange sort of twist and you've sort of burnt it and twisted it and spritzed it over the glass at the end for the finish.
Yeah, I was going to say the fruit here is a lot less stone fruit. We're from the sherry, we're getting the more, I mean, you know, when you talk about Manhattan, you're getting more of that kind of lush dark cherry and berry notes on the nose.
I get a really good sort of, think of like a really big sticky apricot tart covered in, so dried apricots covered in sort of flaked almonds, slightly toasted. I get that note coming off the nose. Getting hungry, it's almost dinner time here.
Yeah, we're right at the lunch hour, so I'm sure some of you who might be tuning in during lunch are getting thirsty for the whiskey. The thing I think that's really important to remark here is, you know, kind of nosing these side by side, we've got two dramatically different whiskeys here.
Yep. Dramatically different, yet you can still tell that they're part of the same family, which is what I like. They're almost like different characteristics. First one, the rare old's a little bit fresher, more vibrant. And then the second one, the 18-year-old, this is more of my fireside dram.
Yeah. No, and this is, I think the 18 is a good representation of something, you know, when you talk about lushness or sweetness in a whiskey from the nose, or even if you say creamy nose, that might sound like an odd kind of note. I mean, how does something kind of smell rich or smell creamy? And one of the best ways to kind of do that is, you know, go into your refrigerator and pull out, you know, your strawberry jam and smell that. And you get a sense of what smell, that kind of fruity, rich, juicy, sweet is. Whiskey, although it doesn't have any fruit in it, does have that ability to deliver those kind of aromas. And, you know, I think this 18 is a good example of sort of bursting fruit, richness. Yeah, it's a nice nose. Let's dive in here. Cheers.
Cheers. and hopefully you get that richness. I mean, you're talking dark chocolate, good single origin sort of espresso drinks, and that sort of the orange twist note that I talked about across the Manhattan. You're getting that as well coming through.
Yeah, the thing that's nice about the 18 that I'm getting in Scotch whiskey, unlike bourbon, where we get wood presented much differently often because we're using refills or even casks that have been used many times. What I like here is the integration of the spice from the spirit and the wood. They come together really nicely in this mid palate, which is important when you've got a lot of sweetness and you've got a lot of fruit going on. That's all well and good, especially in the United States. We often have sweet tooths. But when we talk about whiskey, you got to balance that out with something. So far in the 18, I'm getting a nice balance between those kind of rich, juicy, fruity notes and the more spicy, sort of savory notes in it. It's nice. It's a nice whiskey.
Well, that's what I meant about, when I'm talking about sort of the perfect Manhattan, you've got those bitter notes that sort of almost like you've added a few bitters to it. The beauty is that I'm talking about it's got huge thickness at the mouth, but it's not cloying. It's not, you don't go away and thinking, oh my God, that's overly sweet. It's got a really good balance to it.
Yeah, and the finish here, less dry than the first one that we tried. I would call it medium long, flavorful. Actually, I'd probably say it's bordering on a nice long finish here. But some nice flavor left on the palate. Again, very approachable whiskey. I think this is one of the things that, and again, these are the first time I'm trying these is right now. So this is really my absolutely unfiltered impression. But, again, I think we're dealing with a line here of whiskeys for a blended drinker to be stepping up, approachable, lots of flavor, complexity, and nothing here that's also at an ABV that's not cask strength, that's not going to blow you away. So so far, real consistent taste experience.
I mean, you talk about the ABV there, and I mean that is key. They are approachable, and if you're not used to whiskey and whiskey at this strength, as I said before, you can add water, you can add ice. They do stand up to that. But so I said that it's really interesting actually. So sitting between the rare old and the 18-year-old is the Mortlach special strength, and that's at 49% ABV. And it's fascinating because it's actually the same liquid as rare olds, but at 49% rather than 43.4. And the reason we've done that is that when Dr. Matthew Crowe, who created the whiskies and created the new range in the lab and created the rare old, it's like boys and their toys. When guys have stills, they're like, oh my God, let's see what we can do with them. And it's the same with whiskey. So he was like, let me see what I can also do with this rare old because I'm so proud of it. And he tried it at certain strengths and he found that he hit a sweet spot at like between 48 and 50% where this incredible tropical fruit note comes through. Almost like, when you try an old whiskey and it's the big tropical fruit note comes through and no one ever can really explain where it comes from. Kind of like that, which is huge. But again, it's not too challenging because it's got that thickness and the fruitiness through it.
Right. And one of the things, I could see maybe at that proof for the rare, or maybe even the rare old, maybe some water. 18's really not calling for it. I mean, I can put water into it. Again, if you're watching out, you should drink your whiskey the way that you want to drink your whiskey. Water, ice, however you enjoy it, that's how you enjoy it. My perspective here on the 18 is doesn't necessarily need it. So my recommendation for people who always do put water or always do put ice is taste it first and adjust. Start neat and go from there. I think people very frequently get atomic about just throwing whatever they normally do in whatever they drink. The 18 here, my personal opinion, isn't really crying for ice or water. Your in the audience opinion might be differently, but again, if you're going to give a 18 a try here for the Mortlach, try it neat first. Seems to be where it's drinking well at.
And always try it neat first, because I find with my palate anyway, I'm speaking from personal experiences, that I like whiskies at different strengths depending on sort of the time of day and my mood. So, later on at night when I'm drinking a whiskey, I might add a little bit more water than I would, during the day, because I'm really looking for that. Because water brings out sweetness, and often I've got a massive sweet tooth, so often I'm looking for that a little bit more sweetness to come through. So I'd add more water at that time of day than I would earlier on when I may be drinking my whiskey neat.
So far, one of the things that I'm kind of getting a trend here on the two that we've tasted, and we'll taste the 25 in just a moment. These are familiar flavors, I think, as a Johnnie Walker drinker. Presented differently than some of the blends out there, obviously, because we're blending a lot of things. But this last one, not the current gold, but the previous gold. There's something about some of the flavors that harkens back to some of the taste experience there, that some of the richness. So, and I know you can't comment on what's in what, so I'm just kind of have to speculate. But we're in the flavor zone here of familiarity for Johnnie Walker drinkers, and I think the 18 is deadly in that space.
You can speculate all you want, but all I can say to that is that it has gone into the world's finest blends. As I said, I was with the blending team on Tuesday, and the guys were like, it works, and it's a gem. And it's funny, we talk about it being sort of admired by the whiskey community for decades and by blenders. Well, it's not actually only blenders within sort of, within Diageo. You speak to anyone within the whiskey industry, and I've spoken to quite a few people recently, and they've been like, well, it sits in our top 3 distilleries outside of our company's one, without a doubt. So it comes very highly regarded.
Yeah. I mean, if I were to be a betting person, let's see, 18-year-old age statement gold goes non-age statement. Now we have 18 Mortlach in the market. Anyways, let's move on to the 25. Which I'm very excited to be tasting.
Yeah.
Let's start out. Not a very common spirit here, the Mortlach 25, and priced accordingly, right?
Yep. So this one is sitting at $650. Before you go into this, I want you to take a sip of water as well. Now the key. Sorry, I'm not telling you what to do, but so I thought I knew Mortlach, and a lot of people think they know Mortlach by the bottles they've tried before. And when I tried the first two, I was like, wow, I really don't know it. And then you try this third one, the 25, and if you thought you knew Mortlach before, you really don't when you come to this one. It's astounding, absolutely astounding. So as you mentioned, yes, it's rare. You don't have that much of it. 25 years is a long time. I just over 25, and a lot's happened in my lifetime over that 25 years. So imagine what's happened in this Casks lifetime over that 25 years. And aging it's a science, but it's still an unknown mystery of a science. We still don't really know what entirely happens while whiskey's sitting in this blanket of oak, while it is aging and sort of slumbering peacefully in the warehouses. And I mean, you yourself, you've tried quite a few spirits probably in your lifetime, and you may have tried 1 or 2 whiskeys at an older age that just come out tasting like wood because it's taken on too much of that oak characteristic. So for us to find Mortlach 25 at this sort of this beauty, where you get, as I said before, that distillery expression shining through, the lovely sort of not too overpowering note of oak, it's very rare, and we don't have that much of it. So
yeah, I think you make a really good point, and this is one I think that's worth sort of punctuating. Old does not mean good; it means old. And 25 might be brilliant. 25 might be a train wreck for a whiskey. There is a range there of sort of commonality where a lot of whiskeys do well in, and the earlier side of it, clearly in a lot of spirits, especially single malt under 3 years old is not legally produced as single malt. Same thing in the bourbon space. Well, I mean, it's less. And then on the kind of 18 and older side, we start getting into a territory of spirit where, may not be fantastic. It's just old. So
older doesn't mean better. What you've got to really do is judge the whiskey on the flavor. And also, as I said before, with the water thing, where I like to add a little bit more water later at night, assess it on your mood, assess it on your time of day, assess it on sort of how you're feeling, what you're eating, what else you're drinking, if you're having a beer with it, and look at your whiskey like that as a collection of flavors rather than this is an older whiskey, so I've got to have it at this time of day. This is a younger whiskey, I've got to have it at another time of day,
Good point. Very good point. Okay, so let's dive into Mortlach 25.
Okay. First impressions on the nose, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting. It's you have richness in here, but we're looking at lighter notes. So whereas going from the blended Mortlach to the 18 and very dark, lush fruits, we're getting lighter tones. Are we getting some light malt?
Yep. So for me, this is actually the lightest, which again goes to show that an older whiskey isn't necessarily going to be richer. That's another thing that people often think. So they think older is better and older is richer. For me, this is incredible. It's got this elegance about it. It's sophisticated, it's sultry, decadent. I know I'm throwing out a lot of buzzwords here, but for me, it's absolutely true. It's got, I'm a sucker for Clynelish. I'm not going to lie, I always have been. And for me, on this, I was so shocked, but it's got that lovely sort of waxy characteristic coming through that I absolutely adore from Clynelish and Old Borers. It's got a zestiness, but as you mentioned, it's also got that richness coming through as well, but a different richness. And this has all come from one type of cask, so this is all from refill casks, refill bourbon barrels.
So we've got I mean, and you can see by the color, it's it's maybe hard to tell online here, but it is, although going from 18 to 25, we're jumping up a lot in age. We're lacking the sherry, but the sherry cask here, so it is a lighter color whiskey.
Yep, it is, and as I said, that's come from the fact that it is from a refill cask, refill bourbon barrels.
Ready to taste?
Am I ever?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Quite different from the other two.
Yep. And all of those buzzwords that I brought up before, they come through on the palate as well. So you get that richness, you get that decadent, sort of sophisticated, sort of aged with beauty and style notes coming through.
Well, what's interesting about this one for me is, and I'll be frank, my first step when it hit my palate, my first thought was, Georgie, what are you so crazy about with this whiskey? But it's really an interesting whiskey in that it starts very subtle and soft, and then it's a very slow and steady build into spice and out to the finish.
An incredible long finish as well for me.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to pull off a whiskey that's got a very straight and narrow gradual progression. It's very easy to do sweet, spicy, dry. Many of the whiskeys that we try, have, and if you on drink spirits, you'll read a lot of the tasting notes that are, sweet, spicy, dry, sweet, spicy, dry. One of the things off my first couple of tastes here that I'm getting is subtle, soft, fruit,
Yep.
salt, spice, kind of increasing up and then lingering out. So quite distinct in its taste profile.
Yeah, and it's interesting, with the first two you had that little bit of a sort of a meatiness, gaminess coming through. On this one it's not so much, but I get almost like a white smoke, like the barley isn't smoked, but you get that lovely clean white smoke coming through.
My only note on it is it would be nice to see, and obviously we're dealing in quantity, to see the 25 at a little higher ABV. There's so much going on there that it would be nice to taste it at a little louder volume. It really is. There's some delicacy there that it would be interesting to see what happens at a higher proof. Now, we talked about 18 not watering. I would not touch 25 of water or ice at all. This is as sort of soft a palate, sort of an approachable whiskey as you can have.
Yeah, the way I like to describe this one, and it's going to sound a little bit silly, but I don't really take myself too seriously, as you've realised by now, is when I'm shopping sometimes, I quite like to take myself for a glass of champagne as a little bit of a treat. Very rarely, I might add. But occasionally, treat myself with a little glass of champagne or something, or a martini or something like that. And Mortlach 25 for me is that little bit of a treat. It's that little bit of, when you want to pamper yourself and you want to give yourself something, it's kind of like that.
But at $600, I have to say that's quite an expensive treat.
It is, but I mean, as I said before, with the rarity and the fact that we don't have that much of it, that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, and I think and not to press price here. I think it's important to kind of put in perspective what other things we're seeing in the market. Pricing on whiskey is a really interesting thing. I mean, obviously part of it's supply and demand, but part of it's a secondary market. When we have special releases, when they go into auction or online, you'll often see markup on them, and unfortunately or fortunately, we're starting to see Scotch whiskies act a lot like hot concert tickets. The suppliers have gotten savvy and said, if we put this out at $300 and then it goes for auction for $700 or $800, somebody else is making money on our spirit. So I can understand, but it would be nice to. It's hard when there's whiskeys at this price, because the people who might love them might not be able to afford it. But beautiful whiskey.
Thanks.
So when the box of these came, they didn't come with Mortlach on it. They came with an interesting seal. And I don't know if you probably can't see it. They're around the labels here. But explain a little bit the seal that we see around Mortlach. It's not Johnny Walker. It's not Diageo. It's not Mortlach even.
Buzzword again. So the seal, as I said before, the new Mortlachs are there to honour a lot of things. So they're there to honour the distillation process. They're there to honour the way that it was exported across the empire. They're there also to honour our heritage. And two of our great partners was George Cowie and his son, Dr. Alexander Cowie. So George joined the distillery in 1853, and his son followed shortly afterwards in 1896. And so the emblem that you've got on your beautiful little bottles there that I hand filled myself.
Right. Yeah, we're looking here. I don't know if you can see it. There we are, it's right there. Oh no, I think we're losing you, Georgina. Oh, there we are. You're back.
Back. Okay. So the emblem that's also on all of the bottles as well, that's the George Cowie and Sons logo. So that is our crest. So you can translate it to be a GC and S, which is George Cowie and Sons. So as I said, the new bottles are there to honour them, to honour our most celebrated owners. Cool.
Now, obviously, we've got these kind of lucky samples here, and you've got a actual bottle there. When will we see Mortlach on the shelves, and where will we see it?
So I believe this is coming to you in August, so late summer of this year, and you should see it in whiskey specialist shops and all of your your whiskey liquor stores, I believe. But more details on where to find it will follow once through sort of the USA once that's been announced.
And to be clear, these are not limited edition releases. This is a full-blown single malt product that we're going to see from launch on, correct?
Full blown. However, as I said with the 25, we don't have that much of it. So I'm not saying it's limited edition, but I'm saying it's limited. So yeah, no, but it is completely full blown, and it's so we're launching globally, which is really, really exciting this year. So across the globe.
Great. Well, Georgie, thank you so much for taking the time to taste us through Mortlach and give your behind the scenes on what it is and what people should be looking for when they taste it.
Thank you for having me on this, my first ever Hangout conversation.
Cool. Well, we'll have more coverage on drinkspirits.com. Closer to release, we'll do a full review of the full line. This was just sort of the first impression tastings, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.